What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review an album by Byrd Gang. Basically, this album is called M.O.B, the album, and it came out in the summer of 2008. Now, Byrd Gang is a group by Jim Jones, and in the winter of 2008, Jim Jones dropped the album Harlem's American Gangster, which had the hit single Byrd Gang Money on there, which kind of introduced these guys. It's interesting to kind of get some of this stuff, and I would have to say there are some other Byrd Gang projects. I want to say that there was at least a mixtape that dropped around this time. I'm going to get to some more of these as time goes along, but I do particularly remember this album, the hit single Splash and things like that. There were definitely some good moments on here. And this is a pretty rave album. Like, the more I listened to it, like at first I was going to give this album like a 6.5, 7.5 out of 10, but I really decided the more I listened to it, I started upping the score even more to kind of say that there really is a quite sheer amount of fare on here that has some full-blown hits. And part of the reason why I was kind of less impressed initially was just the fact that I was kind of hoping for more songs like Splash and some of that. But there's definitely, this is not a lackluster album. This is definitely like, if you like Jim Jones's Harlem's American Gangster and you also like Hustler's POME, it's in the same fashion as that, just kind of like a group effort as far as that's kind of concerned. Definitely kind of an East Coast album, but I like this appeal because it's not wholesomely ringtone rap. I kind of look after it. I do feel like Splash was at least a ringtone song. Definitely a pretty good hit to kind of have for Jim Jones and crew in 2008. But I look after it. There are some album cuts on here that do have like some pretty good songwriting. Like, I think Jim Jones not doesn't necessarily take a page out of Tupac's playbook, but he definitely has some songwriting down on this particular album. There's just some good stuff on here that has like a lot of big city kind of flash as far as that's kind of concerned. The beats are just glossy. There's not too many bad beats on here. Overall, well produced album, definitely some good stuff. And this is just probably one of the better albums I've seen out of like the 2000s fair in terms of like East Coast. This is definitely a pretty excellent East Coast album, I would have to say. Now, normally Jim Jones gets a lot of flack in terms of just because some folks still think that his only real hit song is like We Fly High and stuff like that. But you'd have to be a pretty big hater to not appreciate some of these ones. I do feel like Jim Jones in the singles, when you think of like Byrd Gang Money, and you think of some of the ones, there was like another one, when you think of some other hits by Jim Jones, like Emotionless and Weatherman and Love Me No More, Byrd Gang Money, especially Splash, there are some pretty good bops on here. Not, I mean, some of those are not on this particular album, but just to say some of the previous albums that Jim Jones had been repping since late 2006, he definitely had some good appeal as far as that kind of goes. So it's just definitely kind of the concept that there is more to Jim Jones than just the one hit song that he had that was his highest charting song. I would definitely have to say this is a perfect example of like some summer fun, just some overall kind of city flash that has a lot of good bops on here, and there's some nightclub songs on here, but it's not filled with them. It's just kind of, there's some nightclub songs on here, but it's not filled with them. I would have to say it just has a good balance of just like some other stuff on here. It's kind of like a rugged kind of album. It's definitely a pretty gritty album. It's kind of like a G Unit album, something like that, just kind of within that facet. But I look after it just being able to say that there's just some good stuff on here to overall have the widespread kind of more kind of balanced breakfast type atmosphere as far as getting a lot of these. There's no Cameron on here, but Joel Santana's on here a couple of times. N.O.E, who really sounds like Jay-Z, he has some good verses on here. He's pretty lyrical on some of these. He definitely does some good stuff on here, and there's other cats on here that just really work pretty damn well. It was definitely kind of the concept about it. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the singles on this album. There were kind of two of them, one of which was Byrd Gang Money, which was already kind of on another album, which was on Harlem's American Gangster. That was kind of like a pseudo single that they threw on here also, if you didn't notice it back then. That's a good song, but I'm gonna talk about the first single, Splash, then I'll get to Byrd Gang Money. So Splash is kind of a triumphant winning bravado single. I would definitely say it's a flex song, and it's just kind of a ritzy night venue pizzazz, I would say, with some good flash. So this is definitely one I like the kind of appeal of this. I think they were kind of aiming for that sort of bravado type appeal of We Fly High, just something real triumphant and kind of efforted as far as something real triumphant and kind of like brings it home type atmosphere as far as that kind of goes. Just victorious. I like the kind of concept about it. Splash is definitely a victorious kind of song. Definitely like the energy of it. It's just a very kind of ambitious and just a very kind of ambitious and infectious kind of song. Maybe it doesn't have the sheer kind of addictive hook of We Fly High, but it's definitely a follow-up song. I would definitely say in Jim Jones's hit catalog, this is another one that kind of is probably like a good breadwinner to kind of have. It just has that kind of catchiness. Definitely a ringtone rap kind of song on here. It's just kind of one to kind of have for like a decent bop. I would say that this probably would have been like a good follow-up single for Jim Jones to have had on his 2006 album Hustler's POME. This is definitely one that kind of had the appeal about it, but it just kind of It's interesting because this song kind of feels more of like a promotional single, but it does kind of have that appeal of just being like a good triumphant kind of club flash as far as that's kind of concerned. Just the money throwing. Jim Jones says in the song that he doesn't make it rain as much. You know, that was kind of more 2006 type stuff, but he kind of makes it splash now. So it's kind of the concept as far as that kind of goes. Good appeal of that particular concept, just the variation, the evolution of making it rain as far as that's kind of concerned. Like the concept of that. So it's just good follow up single. Another good look for Jim Jones and the crew as far as that's kind of concerned. Joel Santana's on here, so that's a good bop. So I'd have to say Byrd Gang Money is the other single that's on here, and this is also on Harlem's American Gangster, which I recommend you look into if you haven't. I reviewed that back in the spring or winter or something like that. It's been a little bit, but that is a pretty good gem by Jim Jones. Definitely recommend that album. But Byrd Gang Money is kind of a vibrant nightclub gem. I would have to say it has a stellar hook on there, and it's just an overall glossy time. So this is definitely one. This is probably one of the best songs on the album just in terms of like the marketable kind of appeal. Like this is kind of a gritty and more kind of grimy, kind of gutter city type album, but it's just kind of a more grimy version of like the city tunes on Hustlers POME by Jim Jones. But I like the concept of at least getting a good batch of singles on here. And I feel like Splash, Byrd Gang Money, Heartbeat, and like Money Right and some of those type ones do have some of that appeal on here. But is this kind of the concept is just not overcast, not packed with like radio ready type tunes, but there are some ones on here. But I do like the Flash of Byrd Gang Money. It's definitely a highlight if you haven't heard, but it's an almost song for me because it's already been on Harlem's American Gangster. So to talk about the 11 songs I recommend on here, there's 15 songs on here if you don't count the She So Gangsta Freaking You, which is kind of two songs. There's two songs in that. That's a 10.5 minute song, so they combine two songs in there. But basically, in terms of what the songs are numbered by, there's 15 songs on here. So out of those 15 songs, I would say I recommend 11 plus two almost songs. So 11 songs I recommend would be Splash. 11 songs I recommend would be Splash, Throwing BGs, Money Right, Only 17, She So Gangsta, We Flying, Gizang, I'm the Man, Hustle, Blasphemy, and Heartbeat. And the two almost songs would be So Cold and Byrd Gang Money. So Byrd Gang Money is an almost song because it's already on another album. So Cold is a pretty nice one on here. I definitely like the appeal of this one. I definitely like the appeal of So Cold. This is a Liddy kind of dressed up night flash, I would have to say. It's a jazzy ladies tune, definitely, and it's just kind of some glossy, fancy night out type music, and it's got an emphatic beat. The thing about this one is kind of so emphatic to the point where if you're not really having like a jazzy kind of time and a real dress to impress kind of attitude as far as like looking fancy and looking nice as far as that's kind of concerned. Just I feel like the emphasis is a little bit strong if you're just kind of having like a regular night and not having like some gloss about you and just some overall kind of emphatic living as far as that's kind of concerned. If you're just going to like the movie theater, just like the dollar theater, something like that, just, you know, spending like less than a certain amount of money, just spending like, you know, maybe 5 or 10 or 15 bucks tonight, something like that. It doesn't really have that sort of appeal. I mean, it's jazzy, but it's just kind of the concept of the emphasis kind of doesn't match for just like a standard, just doing something simple like going to Burger King or something like that. But I just like the appeal about it. But it is a pretty ritzy one. That's the only reason why it's an almost song. I do feel like the appeal behind it. I mean, it's definitely a good one, but it's just the emphasis is like really jazzed up. So that's just kind of the thing. But it's not a bad song at all. So to talk about some of these on here, I feel like Gizang is a really nice one. Definitely like this song. Really like the very low key. This is a very low key kind of gutter murky city gem, I would have to say. And it has like a smogish and dark blear about it, I would have to say. And it's very thrilling and hooky. So there's definitely some good hooks on here. Pretty hooky album. This is just some kind of like this is a pretty low key album. I feel like Byrd Gang, just because Splash didn't really chart that heavily, kind of made me question like how the degree of like the success it got. I think this album at least sold 85,000 copies, about, you know, maybe made it about halfway or a third of the way to going gold, something like that. But I just would have to say kind of the concept about it, that there are some good hooks on here, and this is actually pretty commercial stuff, just in a more low key kind of sense. So it's definitely like secret Jim Jones songs, but Gizang's a really nice one. Probably one of the better beats on the album. A wintry kind of song on this album is Hustle. This is a wintry night flash, and it has an imperative feel about it, and it's a money song with a gritty but fancy kind of feel about it, and it has gloss. So this is definitely kind of one. Definitely kind of like the kind of this overall blue blood kind of fanciness of Hustle. This is just a good bop to kind of have on here. There's not too many songs like this on this particular album, but I did like the kind of imperative feel that it kind of had and such. Definite good one. A radio ready song on here is Heartbeat. This is kind of a snazzy, bop-ish kind of commercial city tune, I would have to say. It's kind of on the go. I would have to say Travers kind of song as far as that's kind of concerned. Just a little bit of bustle about it. It's just a sparkling kind of promo song, and it has some motivational pep about it. So there are some hustle songs on here, I would have to say. It does have a bearing concept of money. It does kind of have a bearing concept of money, but there are some good bops on here that kind of make you want to get up and get some stuff and just have some fun as far as that's kind of going along the way. So some good concepts. Definitely a motivated album. She So Gangsta is a pretty nice one on here. Now, I'm not. I don't think I'm going to subtract from the score for me to be able to say that I wound up liking approx 11 songs out of 16, but then with So Cold and Byrd Gang Money, it'd be 13 out of 16 because I didn't really appreciate Freaking You that much. That was just kind of a subpar R&B type tune that didn't work that well. But the song that's paired along with it, She So Gangsta, is really good. This is a summary kind of riding type tune for chicas, definitely. The sort of stuff that Tupac kind of does on a song like Just Like Daddy off the 7 Day Theory. Definitely has that kind of summary type fare. It's a good bop for that. This song is a nice hazed kind of day commerce hit, I would have to say, and it's a good album cut. So I definitely like the appeal of this one. Just really kind of malaise, kind of just smoke a few swishers type. Just really kind of a malaise, smoke a few swishers type tune with some chicas type feel as far as that kind of goes. Just easy kind of late summer type fare as far as that's kind of concerned. So I definitely like the appeal of that. So Money Right's a nice nightclub song. This is like an electro promo song with good bounce about it. It's a hustle and motivational type tune, I would have to say, and it's just an easy kind of nightclub hit. So if you like songs like Splash and Byrd Gang Money, I would say this is a good follow-up to kind of have for that sort of thing. It's definitely a pretty good one on here to have. Yeah, I just would say it's a good gem. Throwing or Only 17 is kind of a good tune. This one's a little bit different variation, but I do like this one. Only 17 kind of has like a different type of feel about it, but I did like the fare that it kind of had. This one's kind of like a Meanwhile type song, just kind of off to the side type feels as far as that kind of goes. Definitely reminds me of like a Smoke One track, I would have to say. And it's just a lazy highlight, definitely. And it's a city hopping song with like some low key appeal. So this is definitely one that's kind of just low key antics, just stuff like that. Just kind of walking through the city, getting snacks, that type stuff. Just kind of just out and about, but just kind of in a more just relaxed, kind of comfy type sense as far as that kind of goes. Just kind of one that's just kind of lazy and just, yeah, just reminds me of like a Meanwhile type song, I would have to say. Another song kind of like Only 17 that had some original fare about it is We Flying. This is kind of an overcast malaise of a song with a realness factor about it. And it's just some regular fare, I would have to say. It's got some city day flash and commerce, definitely, and it's just a unique kind of song. This one just kind of felt like, I definitely felt like We Flying kind of had like an overcast malaise about it, just kind of like in a Solon type feeling, just with like a good realness factor. So that's a good one to kind of have. It just felt like a leftover from, definitely felt like a leftover from Jim Jones's Hustlers POME album. So that's a good fare about it. Throwing Bee Gees is a pretty good bop on here. This is some getting ready to step out jazziness, I would have to say. It's a regular night flash and it's hooky and radio ready. So there's definitely some ones on here like Splash, Throwing Bee Gees, Money Right, Heartbeat. I would say a little bit of Gizang, and then Byrd Gang Money are some definite ones for kind of some more social type fare. So there are some gems on here, but there is kind of some other factors about it. But I did like the concept. This is kind of one like Jim Jones is not on this song Throwing Bee Gees, but I did feel like NOE did. I did feel like NOE and some of these cats did a pretty good job of taking the role for this particular stuff. So that's kind of the concept about it. I'm the Man. I don't know if I talked about this song, but this is kind of a quicker tune and it's a Travers gem. I would definitely have to say it's for some city nights and pizzazz, I would have to say. And it's a 2000s kind of stunt night out kind of gem. So this is kind of one, this is one of the more kind of fast life, kind of bleary type tunes that Jim Jones does on albums like Harlem Diary of a Summer and then Hustlers POME. This is just kind of one, it's a little bit of a stunting kind of quicker living type tune as far as that kind of goes. This is definitely some stunting kind of, this is definitely kind of a flexing vehicle type tune for quicker living as far as those kind of concerned. Definitely like the concept of getting some of these ones for more outing sense and just kind of more being out and about kind of within the Travers type fare, just a little bit of Travers kind of on your mind and stuff. So it's definitely kind of the concept. I don't know if I talked about this tune either, but another highlight on here is Blasphemy. This is kind of a vintage mixtape like cut. I would have to say it's an East Coast gem, and it reminds me of like the Carter 2 by Lil Wayne. Definitely with some of that like Money on My Mind, some of those type bops that were kind of produced by the Runners and that type of stuff. I would definitely have to say, and it's just a fun city hopping kind of jive about it. So that's kind of a definite one to kind of have. Is interesting because Jim Jones and Lil Wayne were kind of similar around that time, so it's a good bop to kind of have as far as that kind of goes. So to talk about some of the songs I didn't enjoy on here, which were not many, which is really just Mobbin', Freaking You, and then Oopsie Daisy, which Oopsie Daisy was kind of like a more thought-provoking one, just kind of a more just introspective kind of one, kind of similar to like Tupac's, like Dear Mama, some of that type of stuff. I just didn't like the approach of that one. I mean, I can see it having its role and its meaning, but I just didn't have as much connection with it. And I kind of feel like Mobbin was just kind of like a worse version of Gizang. That one was just not quite as catchy. The beat on Gizang was just better. They probably should have been on that one. But that was kind of a Jim Jones solo song was Gizang. But the Byrd Gang crew is on Mobbin. That one just didn't have quite as much appeal. And then Freaking You was just kind of an R&B tune that just didn't have as much catchiness for me. So to talk about so basically, what I'm going to score this out, me liking 13 songs out of 15, basically, because Byrd Gang Money's a hit, and I did like So Cold. That one just kind of has a learning curve. I would have to say 13 out of 15 is definitely going to get a 10 out of 10. Even 13 out of 16 if you count Freaking You. This album's going to get a 10 out of 10. In terms of the social score, though, I'm gonna give this album like a 9.5 out of 10. I feel like there's a lot of good bops on here, definitely some appeal. It has a pretty vivid approach as far as that's kind of concerned. But I kind of feel like it's still relatively low key, and I kind of feel like Splash is a good song, definitely a good hit and a surprise hit. Jim Jones song, a secret Jim Jones song. If you don't know that much about him, as far as that's kind of concerned, but I kind of look after it like in term if Splash is basically the biggest song. So if you don't fuck with Splash and if that doesn't win you over, it's kind of like there's just not like I feel like Harlem's American Gangster just had more widespread appeal with the singles that it had. I mean, Splash is definitely a good promotional single and it has some of its appeal about it, but I just feel like it's just not like the immediate kind of breadwinner. It just kind of has like I feel like Splash kind of has 7.758 out of 10 kind of appeal about it where it's good, but it's just not as much of a killer kind of it's just not as much of a killer must have as Byrd Gang Money or We Fly High or something like that. So this is just kind of more kind of not necessarily stunted. This is just kind of like mildly blunted kind of Jim Jones on here where I still give it a 10 out of 10, but just in terms of like casual kind of appeal, I think Splash is the most widespread one, but even that one's kind of I would think some folks might think it was ho hum if you're just not really like a true fan or you just are not like super won over. I think that's just kind of the concept. That's just the thing about it. So it gets a 9.5. I mean, basically, this is an excellent album. So I just would have to say, I just wouldn't join the crowd of folks who just are not won over by Jim Jones because there's some good stuff on here. It's just kind of the concept. So just for casual folks, it just makes me question the overall appeal that it would have wholesome with that. But that's just kind of the thing. So in terms of the future, like Jim Jones put out an album in 2023, and he has a bunch more projects I'm going to get to and review. And there's definitely some good stuff on here. So there's some more stuff yeah, there's some more stuff that's going to be reviewed. There's definitely like a Byrd Gang mixtape and stuff like that. So we'll get to some of these.